Hi, and welcome to Wednesday. I am Tracy Stuckrath, founder of Thrive Meetings and Events and the Eating at a Meeting podcast, which you're listening to live. And this is Food Allergy Awareness Week, and I am going live every single day interviewing different experts in different facets of food allergies so that we can understand where our attendees are coming from and how we can produce better events with and feed those people at our events and actually understand our own lives, because I'm sure that there are 32 million Americans with food allergies. And so I'm sure that you have somebody that you know who has a food allergy. Today's guest is Amanda Warren, and she is a holistic practicer, a nourish-centered. She's nourish-centered. She's a mom. She's a wife. She's a school nutrition director. She's an educator, and she's an alpha-gal survivor and thriver. And so welcome to the show, Amanda.
Hi, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And so I found you in the article in what was that? Food Service Magazine, right?
Food Management Magazine.
Food Management Magazine. You wrote a couple of months ago about having the alpha-gal syndrome and what that means for food service providers. But before we get into what we can do, will you explain to people what alpha-gal is? And actually, before you do that, I do want to make a disclaimer here, is that for everybody listening, neither Amanda nor I are doctors. Amanda is a food service professional as well as someone who has alpha-gal. So she's talking from personal experience, and then I'm just asking her questions based on that. So anyway, so back to that question. What is alpha-gal syndrome, and how did you find out you had it?
Right. So alpha-gal syndrome is, it's complex, but I'll just start by saying that it's a tick-borne condition. So you get bit by a tick, and this tick bite produces an immune response if you are, affected by the alpha-gal that the tick is carrying. And what that creates, as far as an immune response, is a spectrum of symptoms, and these symptoms vary from person to person, but it can range anywhere from gastrointestinal, distress, and it can be only that, or it can be combined with other symptoms like hives and rashes, flushing, fatigue, joint pain. All of these can mimic, other conditions that we most often encounter, like flus and other kinds of viruses and things like that. And so the misdiagnosis around this is frequent.
Okay. And how did you find out that you figure out that this is what it was?
Well, I'm from the South, and so ticks are endemic in the South, and I'd heard of the red meat allergy in, a distant passing, and had been bitten by a tick actually in 2019 on my back, and then got another tick bite last May. And that tick bite, as well as the other one, both became inflamed. I had cellulitis, had to do antibiotic treatments and steroids and things along that line. And then I would say within 2 weeks of the initial, the tick bite, the most recent tick bite, I started having a myriad of symptoms, rashes, swelling, hives, vomiting, other gastrointestinal kind of things going on, random like body itching, like from the inside out, where I just could not figure out what was going on. And it just so happened that it was a summer afternoon, and my husband wanted to grill hamburgers, and I don't eat red meat very often, like maybe once or twice a year. And so I can clearly hear myself saying to him, "Oh yeah, I think I'll have a hamburger. I haven't had a hamburger in like a year." And so I eat a hamburger, and it's around 5, 6 o'clock, dinner time. And around 9 o'clock, we sit down to do TV time, and I get that all of a sudden this horrible itching, the bottoms of my feet, the palms of my hand, the top of my head. My wrists start breaking out with like welts. And I just looked at him. I said, I think I might have that weird tick thing, that red meat allergy. And he's like, what? And so I just started Googling it real quick. And like the list of symptoms, I could just check. And I was like, yeah, like I really think I have this. And so I was actually waiting for an appointment with the allergist because I'd been seen at a primary care office for anaphylaxis, did not know why I was having all these reactions. And I'd been to her prior for some other random rashes and things like that. And, she had said, something's going on. We need to get you into an allergist. So in the midst of me waiting for this allergist appointment, I took red meat out. I was like, okay, I'm fine. I'm safe. I'll just take red meat out. And of course, we've been conditioned by the food industry that pork is the other white meat. Mm-hmm. And so a few weeks later, I consumed pork and had the exact same reaction that I'd had with the hamburger, and then did another deeper dive and was like, oh yeah, this is not a red meat allergy. This is a mammalian meat allergy. And I think that terminology is, it's harmful to the to the AG community because it lends to a lack of understanding around this allergy.
Well, and mammalian meat means buffalo, beef, pork, otter. I don't know why that just came into my mouth, into my brain, but
squirrel, deer.
Squirrel, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So venison. But it doesn't include fish and shellfish, and it doesn't include poultry, which is chicken and fowl and things like that, right?
Right.
Yep. But that, and I was reading an article by Dr. Scott Commons, an MD who's at the University of Chapel Hill. Mm-hmm. And even to add to your, hey, I'm not eating red meat, but I'm going on with my life. It says here that since it was first diagnosed or first heard of back in, where did it go? In the last dozen years,
2009, I think it was
2009. So it says it can produce isolated gastrointestinal symptoms. Reactions have been reported from heart valves, and that comes from surgeons using pig skin in their surgeries. Both of my parents have pig skin in their bodies. Mm-hmm. It can come from medications because we're using mammalian type products in that. Fumes from cooking the meat because the proteins are getting in the air, and then other mammal derived ingredients, which would be, and I think you have these symptoms too, is like you can't have the dairy, right? And what other things else have you eliminated from your diet?
Right. So yeah, I was diagnosed with a class 5 dairy allergy, which shocked me because even after taking out all of the mammalian products, I didn't even consider dairy, but I was still sick. I was still finding myself frequently with flu-like symptoms. The main, like the facial swelling and the rashes and the hives had dissipated, but I was having a lot of GI issues and a lot of joint pain and things along that line. So yes, dairy definitely is something that I cannot have. But also, unbeknownst to me, Carrageenan is a part of this syndrome and a part of the foods that should be maybe considered when you're eliminating and thinking about still being reactive once you're being compliant with everything.
And Carrageenan.
Carrageenan. It's a red algae, but it does contain the alpha-gal epitope. I'm not quite sure science-wise how it all works.
Okay.
But you can, it's been documented, at least anecdotally, that people do react to this. And I can say from my end, while I was, researching and eliminating and working on compliance, I consumed seafood in sushi. It was tuna and salmon, and was very ill about 4 hours afterwards, and like vomiting, flushing, feeling lightheaded and sick. And so I kind of get past my tears and all this and start Googling, do they put dairy in sushi? Because I couldn't even figure out why this would have made me so sick. And it led me to the discovery of Carrageenan being a part of this syndrome. And then discovered that the almond milk that I'd been using as a substitute for dairy alternative also did contain Carrageenan. It was on the label. I just didn't know that was part of it. And so that was also continuing my symptoms.
Wow. I mean, it's mind blowing because, there's a couple of things that I want to pull from all of that. So one, typical, I'm going to put typical in quotation marks, an allergy reaction happens within 2 minutes to 2 hours.
Right.
But you and a friend of mine who has this as well says your reactions are 4 hours later.
Yeah. So that's that's
harder.
It's the anomaly around this food allergy is that it has a latent reaction time, and it can actually be anywhere from 3 to 10 hours.
Wow.
And so it's really difficult to connect back to the food. Most people assume that if they're going to get sick from a food, either from, a foodborne illness or from an allergy reaction, that it'll be fairly immediate, but it's not.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and then you might think that you have food poisoning from something, right? And not an allergy, right?
Exactly.
And a lot of people they just think it's an intolerance or anything as well. Anyways, which is, is something to think about up at first, but then when it continues to happen constantly. Yeah.
I think, as human beings, we love to attribute, we love to put things in boxes, and I was definitely working through all that in my brain while these symptoms were emerging, and I was dealing with all of this. I was thinking things like, well, the stress of the pandemic and COVID has finally just sent me off the deep end, and my body is just falling apart. I was getting ready to turn 50, so I thought all the aches and pains were, just getting old. And I was like, well, this is it. This is what 50 is like. Great. And then, I've had seasonal allergies, and I've had, allergies my whole life. I have like a latex allergy, just dermal, and I have allergies to some metals. So I kept thinking it was like, I would just throw out a product. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm getting this rash because of this or this or this. But then the hamburger night really like put it all together. I made a linear connection and was like, okay, this is what this is.
Well, and especially since you hadn't eaten it, so it made it a lot more obvious.
Right. It made it obvious for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, okay, so, and you only got diagnosed with this last October, is that right?
My appointment was in November, and I got the diagnosis the first week of December.
Okay.
And I self-diagnosed in October.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when they diagnosed with you, and I'm just kind of prefacing or whatever it would be from the last two previous shows, what did they tell you that, and then what happens? What do they give you information on it? What do they do?
So I would say that the aftercare around this was definitely lacking. And that's not to slight anyone. Exactly. It was just, I was told, oh, hey, yeah, you were right. You knew this, right? You have this. And I was like, oh, okay, great. And also you have a dairy allergy, and here's your paperwork, avoid all of this stuff. And that was kind of the end. And so all of the following stuff was me just researching and connecting to other support groups where I found a lot of information. I didn't know that, histamines could go out of whack from this. And I had an issue where I thought I was being very, very compliant and doing all the right things, and ended up with a terrible flushing and breaking out down my face and neck that evening. And I just went on to one of the support groups, and I was like, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing everything right. I'm reading labels. I'm eating whole foods. And then someone explained that the histamine bucket can fill up. And I had a very high histamine day. I'd made myself a seafood stew. So seafood, tomatoes, paprika, all the spices, had some black tea and, things like that. So I was able to sort of come around to that and figure all that out too.
So that's a whole nother level of managing your diet.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And figuring that out. So, okay. And then now you are a the director of school nutrition, right?
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So you're responsible for designing the food menus for a couple thousand kids.
Yes. A couple thousand kids. Yeah.
In Virginia. So how did that impact? Well, I want to know how it impacted your life besides just the general thing, but how did it impact your job?
So professionally, this was definitely a challenge, but it also broadened, I think my knowledge around food allergies and also my empathy around food allergies. I've always, we've always been really careful to accommodate children with food allergies, and worked closely with parents sometimes to create specific menus for our kids. But it opened my eyes to, just the difficulties and the complications, and also the lack of knowledge, the lack of empathy and understanding around food allergies. So that was a good part. And so instead of just doing management training around food allergies, we're going to do a school department wide, or school nutrition department wide certified allergy training this coming fall. So I'm happy that we're moving in that direction. And leading out loud, I think, so that other people will follow that are in the school nutrition industry. And then I would say that, the downside is that I do have some airborne reactivity. So when particles, the lipid molecules are in the air, they land on things, they get in your nose, whatever. And I do have reactions to that. So having conducted culinary trainings quite a bit with my staff, and hoping that I could continue to conduct these, I would try, and it doesn't work. So I have to keep thinking about creative ways to continue to professionally develop, my staff, while being mindful of my limitations and the condition that I now have.
Well, yeah. And we talked about it before we came on, could you wear a mask? Could you wear gloves? And you were wearing gloves in the most recent incident, but you weren't wearing a mask. So that could potentially be something to help you do that, but we never know.
Right. And I certainly will try it. And like I told you before, I have a little resistance to it at this point, just because I'm stubborn, and it makes me angry that I can't do the work the way, that I've always done the work. But I will try it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that says something about employment, right? And when we chatted, a month ago, right? Before this, we were talking about you going to a conference, and can you tell people, I really love the fact, love what your school system did for you to help accommodate you while you're traveling, but can you tell people about that, all of that combined?
Sure. Yeah. So that was my first experience, actually, getting back out into the world. And I think it's important also to just note that when I was diagnosed, we were still in the middle of a basic shutdown, because of COVID and the pandemic. And so I had not been going out to eat. I had not been going to meetings in person. I had not been attending conferences. So this was my first experience kind of reemerging into the world with a brand new condition and food allergy that I'd never had to manage before. But the support from the school side was great. They know what's going on with me, and they understand it. And so they were super supportive in allowing the entire meal compensation, even though meals were provided, which normally if meals are provided, they don't offer you that compensation, but they knew that I was going to have to buy and prepare my own food. And so when I attended the conference, I had originally, added into the registration that I had alpha-gal allergy, and was considering maybe trying to see if a chef could accommodate. But I was really nervous around that, because I had only trusted myself to prepare my food, and occasionally my husband to prepare my food. And so it was hard to think about letting control of that. And it was a very, very busy conference. It was short staffed, and I had asked
pandemic.
Right. And so I'd asked a close friend of mine that was directing the conference, do you think I should have this meal? And she said, no. Wow. They're too busy, and I'm afraid that things will fall apart and they won't get you right. So I ended up, eating lots of fresh fruit that I brought with me, and a couple bags of Lay's here and there. I snuck those in. But yeah, it was difficult because normally, those networking times are around those meals. And because there were mammalian products being served, I didn't go down for the meal service just because I didn't know what my reactivity might be in the presence of those meals. It's challenging.
It is challenging. And then also thinking about it is like preparing your own meals. And granted, you had potato chips and apples or fresh fruit, but that might also mean considering a different hotel to stay in, so that might have a kitchen, right? That you could prepare your own food, and which then means you have to rent a car potentially, or those other, as Ruth said yesterday, kind of putting on your armor. What do I have to do to take care of myself when I'm traveling, right? And that would be part of that, those extra steps that you have to take.
Yeah, there's lots of extra considerations, and then that adds, expense too. And so that can be problematic if the budget isn't there for those extra expenses.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, and I know that you and your husband used to travel and go out to eat and find new places. And so that's probably impacted a lot of that as well too, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we are both foodies. We cut our teeth in the food industry and restaurant business. And he's a great cook too. And so we love to cook together, and we used to love to go out to eat together. Although most of the time we were a little disappointed because we think we can do it better every time. But yeah, so recently, we went downtown to downtown Charlottesville, which is a town about 45 minutes from where we live, and it's a beautiful little eclectic town, and lots of eateries in the downtown section. And one of the things that we would have liked to do in the past was dip in and out, and try an appetizer here, and let's go try this here. And so walking through that downtown area that night was. It definitely left a hole because that just wasn't a part of what we were going to do anymore. And so we found some other things to do. We ducked into a few little shops here and there. But I felt that, kind of that missing piece.
Oh, I can imagine. Because food is very much part of our lives, no matter where you are, whether you're in school or work or, just in your daily lives. I mean, we all have to eat. But so now let's jump into, your food service director, but you're reading labels, and how hard, because mammalian is not required by the Food Allergy Labeling and Consumer Protection Act to be labeled on food. So how do you manage that? And what are the words that you look for?
Are you asking how I manage that independently for myself, or?
Well, I mean, I think you've learned independently for yourself, but also in the school system. And I think coming from the context that you are in food service, you're a chef, so you know how to cook. So how does a layman person who's not a chef, understand how to find that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, I think some of the key terms are, if you're dealing with alpha-gal allergy, that if it says natural flavors, you avoid it, because natural flavors can hide mammalian byproducts. If it contains things like magnesium stearate or glycerin, all of that can be animal derived. And unless you contact the manufacturer directly to find out, what the derivative is, you don't know. And so you just need to be mindful of that. Of course, looking for Carrageenan, looking for things that say, color added, because you just don't necessarily know if that color added is coming from a red algae.
Right.
And, when I'm purchasing chicken, I'm looking for animal byproduct free, vegetarian fed, things along that lines. As far as, other problematic ingredients, I think that is the challenge, because mammal byproducts hide under a multitude of names. And there are lists out there that you can look at, but they're not comprehensive. I do know that there's a new app called Fig, and Fig does have the alpha-gal allergy in the program. And so you can use that to sort of scan and find these problematic ingredients.
Okay.
Which is very helpful.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you said something in there. Because you don't, I mean, some of those words you can't pronounce, right? And we don't know what they are. Oh, I know what it was. Do you trust something that has been certified vegan?
No. Because
why is that?
Well, because certified vegan can still contain Carrageenan, because Carrageenan is a plant-based product.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. Okay. So if Carrageenan is problematic for you, you would want to make sure that you read the label. And it's good to see on a lot of beverages now, a lot of dairy alternatives, you'll see Carrageenan free. And so a lot of people are moving in that direction. And And I think the Cornucopia Institute is an organization that is working toward removing Carrageenan from organic products specifically, because that's their niche. But if we can get movement in the organic industry, then it can trickle down to other industries. Right. And so I think that's really, really important.
Well, no, that's a really, interesting fact, because you would think, I'm going to have something that's certified vegan, but there are some plant-based specifically the one plant-based product. So you eat very whole food related. I do. Right? Yep. So one of my rules is if it's prepackaged, I don't even have anything prepackaged here. Here's some of Purely Elizabeth stuff. So this has actually got more than 5 ingredients in it, but I know what they are. Right. But I typically, like you, try to do 5 ingredients or less. Right. Is that right?
Yeah, that's typically my rule. Now, again, like you said, if it's a whole packaged product, sort of a whole foods, that's packaged, and you can identify each ingredient, and each ingredient is safe, pure, or whatever, then, I would say go for it. Yeah. But if, that ingredient label contains, a list of ingredients that are not recognizable, it is just not worth it. It's not worth it for your health to risk it. And we know that, a whole apple or a whole, potato, if it's prepared correctly, with allergen free, it's not going to be harmful to you.
Right. So, well, and that's a good thing. Now, as a food service provider, and delving into this since December, what advice do you have for others in the industry on managing this for their clients? And
yeah. So, I think the best advice is just to arm yourself with knowledge, to build awareness, to really, really understand deeply what this allergy means to the people that are afflicted, not just a base understanding, and to remove assumptions around it. Again, hearing red meat allergy and going, okay, I got this, and then just not serving steak. Cross contact is an issue. For those that are dairy sensitive, it's an issue. And so I think, a deep understanding first and foremost, do a deep dive, really, really know what you're getting into. And then you have to train. You have to train, and retrain, and it has to be consistent, and it has to be, continuous training.
Exactly, because staff overturns, we get busy, we kind of forget about things as well. And okay, I'm going to jump back to your training that you're going to do this fall. Typically, and I'm not bashing this at all, but Serve Safe covers the top 8. I don't know if they've updated for the top 9, but top 9 allergens. Are you going to, I'm assuming you're going to expand it to alpha-gal, so that's in there. Are you going to expand it? And do you know what foods that the kids in your school are allergic to outside of the top 9?
Yeah. So, I receive, individual health plans to review for any student that has an allergy. So I do know what we're dealing with. I have one student with alpha-gal allergy that I accommodate for. And we actually have another student in our system with alpha-gal allergy, but we don't accommodate. They made a decision not to. And perfectly understandable. Right. But so we receive those individual health plans, and I do intend to broaden our training around, alpha-gal, because it is increasing. I know that we're going to see more students. It's emerging. And I think the more information that gets out there, the more diagnoses that we'll see. And then it's just important for people to understand and know how to accommodate and how to deal with it.
Yeah. My friend, Lynn, welcome to the show, Lynn. Thank you for tuning in. She says a vegan restaurant asked a rabbi to oversee the kashrut to make the restaurant kosher. When the rabbi got there, he found many of the ingredients had dairy in them. I was talking to Ruth from the UK yesterday. A woman in the UK went into a vegan restaurant and had an anaphylactic reaction to milk. And that restaurant said, oh, well, we don't confirm that all of the products that we use are vegan. I'm like, okay, you're a vegan restaurant.
Right. And so that's problematic too. And that's also the other important part of industry is that you have an intimate knowledge of the food that you're serving. You have got to understand, those, the base ingredients of the main, thing. You have to, if it contains sugar, where did the sugar come from? Don't just make assumptions again around the food that you're serving.
Well, and that can be hard because, I mean, food allergy families are really good about calling the manufacturers, right?
Yep.
And asking the questions. And food service providers, especially coming out of COVID, you're swamped and calling them, and I know that families get a lot of pushback too. And I use the Bush baked beans commercial thing, like the dog has got the secret ingredient, right?
Right.
But they don't want to give the secret ingredient away. And it's like, it's not that we want that. We just want to know if this is in it, right?
Right. Yeah. And trade secrets, that's a part of the complexity around food allergies too, because they can protect some of their ingredients. And so again, my advice is, if you don't know, you don't go, you just, you stray away from that direction. But it's the responsibility of a business owner, of a restaurant or a food service provider to do that deep dive. I know it's harder. I know it's more complex. Hire someone specifically that's, in charge of doing just that. But it's your responsibility to your patrons, to have that deep understanding of what you're serving. And I don't think anybody out there would feel good about knowing that, something that they served or something that happened in their establishment created illness in someone else, or pain or suffering. We have to really consider that around other people.
And food, it's not new, but it's new to delve deeper into it, right?
Yes.
And it does, and it's harder because we are, and I went to a convention recently, and there's a lot of these vegan items that are coming out. There's a lot of long terms in there, right? You can't read them, and you don't know what they are,
right?
But we have to be forthcoming. Let's be transparent. There you go.
Transparency. That's really important. And also, just, I think when you're labeling your food, being mindful that you're not trying to capture an audience that's not your audience. For instance, like, recently I saw veggie filled muffins, right? And it was like Vegalicious or something along that line. And I'm like, oh, cool. So I pull it down and it's like plant-based on the front with little leaves and all that. And then I flip it over and it's got dairy in it, when I read the label, and I'm just like, ugh, like that's not plant-based.
Right.
So just be mindful. If you want to serve a plant-based muffin with dairy should be on the front of that box. It should just be included. And again, that's just that transparency piece.
Right. And I think a lot of people put it that plant-based means vegetarian. Right. And because there is a big difference between vegan and vegetarian.
Absolutely.
And for everybody's clarification, vegetarian means you eat the byproducts of animals. So eggs and honey and milk. Right. But vegan, you're avoiding all of those things as well. Right. Besides the animal-based meats. Right. True. So and actually that makes me, it's hard to then say just the definition of plant-based. Right. Because some people want to get away from the word vegan because it's got harsh connotations to it. So they go plant-based, which is great, but you also, who's deciding what that means?
Who is deciding what that means? Yeah. And that's interesting because that goes back to, FDA and regulations around food labels and what it means. And it seems like every time a new trend emerges, a new problem emerges around that same trend with regards to food labels.
Right. Yeah. And it's a touchy subject, and it's a hard thing to do. I mean, I just labeled food for an event 2 weeks ago, and trying to make sure that everything is labeled correctly. It's not easy,
Right. It's not.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So what priorities do you think that can have the greatest impact on alpha gal right now?
So, I mean, I think the greatest priorities right now are awareness, period, diagnosis, I think that, there are lots of people out there undiagnosed and suffering needlessly and being ill needlessly for years on end. I think that I read in one article that the average time to identify that the alpha-gal is 9 years.
Wow.
9 years that people wait to figure out why they've been suffering, the spectrum of symptoms. And also the fact that it is or can be just specific GI issues without any of the other surrounding symptoms. And so people get placed in IBS categories or, other kinds of gastrointestinal type, diagnoses. And so I think diagnosis is key, because the more people get diagnosed, the more resources will build around it. The second priority, obviously, is the medical community, getting knowledge into the medical community. Again, all the major support sites that I've, been on, that seems to be extremely problematic, not only with people not being diagnosed, but when they are diagnosed, not getting the treatment and the care that should be required, wrapped around them. And even sometimes are, kind of scoffed by the medical community, maybe this isn't real, or are you making this up, or I've never heard of that, or, things along that line. And it's the responsibility of our medical community. We are their customers too. And so it's the responsibility of them to be knowledgeable, but they can't, they can't access knowledge if it's not there to be given. And then the third priority, I think, is advocacy, activism, and that all leads to, food labels and government agencies coming together and doing, tick-borne prevention and tick-borne information, and then also, food allergy information. I mean, it's big, so it's hard to narrow down priorities. But I think diagnosis, information to the medical community, and actively changing food labels so that we can be safe.
And I love all of those, because it has to come from both sides, right? And I know we all get a lot of flack for going on and Googling things and trying to figure out, but I'm like, you went to them and said, I think this is wrong with me. I mean, and then they confirmed it. So I think working together is really, really important.
It is. Yeah. I think always working together is really important. Change happens in numbers. It just really does.
Well, and you can, it's like the plumber, right? You call the plumber for a problem, and when he shows up, there's nothing wrong, right? And when you go to the doctor, the same thing can happen. And so that's where, some of that misdiagnosis or things happen. And even I was talking to a chef last week at a convention, and I said something about the alpha-gal, and they're like, that's not real, and I'm like, it is real. And you don't want to be that person, and you don't want to be that person who won't take the time to feed somebody.
Right. Or take the time to be knowledgeable about it. Right. I mean, to be closed-minded around something that, people are suffering with, I think is, again, it's just not responsible, as a business owner or a provider of services.
Right.
Yeah.
And one thing that it just popped into my head from our conversation prior to coming on is the fact that your school system is all Scratch Kitchen, right?
Virtually.
Virtually. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Not virtually like right here, but
right.
Almost all.
I mean, some things, some things about our program don't lend to scratch cooking. For, grab and go breakfasts are obviously, typically prepackaged, pastries, muffins, cereals, things along that line. But we do focus our lunch meals on a scratch cook program. Right now we have a 2-week menu cycle, and 8 of those meals on that 2-week cycle are scratch cook meals.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's because I did some work in Atlanta with one of the school districts, and we were working with the cafeteria cooks, teaching them how to cook some new things, because it was coming from a commissary instead. So that is a lot of the stuff that's coming into schools is not necessarily cooked right. Most of the stuff is not usually cooked right there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that, there was a time when major equipment that lended itself to scratch cooking was removed from cafeterias around the nation.
Right.
And then those schools, aren't now, the infrastructure is not set up for scratch cooking. But our schools have remained intact with that equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And while that equipment may have sat for a while unused, we're now bringing it all back out. And we've been working on a scratch cook program for, I'm in my 7th year. So for 5 years.
Okay.
And we've been working on, introducing kids to plant-based foods and to culturally responsive, type foods, so that we are inclusive in the way that we're presenting our meals, because we do have a broader, base of different ethnicities and things like that in our school system. And so we want to serve foods that they recognize and that make them feel special. So all of this was happening way prior to Alpha-Gal. But it did set me up, I think, to transition more easily through this. And I'm also a really passionate person, and I let that passion fuel me, even when, it's something that is vexing me, like Alpha-Gal syndrome. I find ways, to sort of work around the parts that seem depressing, or the parts that, make me angry, or, make me feel frustrated. And so I think, that's important. But yeah, this work was happening prior to this. And so it just all sort of fits together in this nice little, basket. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So what does from both perspectives of having somebody who with Alpha-Gal, but also being in a food service position, what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience mean to you?
Yeah, safety obviously, is food safety in general. Making sure that you have a good HACCP plan in place, and not only that you have the plan, but that you're following the plan, and that you have continuous training around that plan. And then again, implementing food allergy training and awareness. I think having your your menus be transparent, having ingredient lists available for your patrons to review, things along that line, that creates that safety space. The inclusivity part is, of course, just making sure that people feel special, and that they feel present in your place, so that they feel represented. And what that looks like, I think, is very individualized based upon, who your audience is, who your patrons are. But something that I love to host, meals and stuff in my own personal world. And one of the things that I always try to do is fix, if one of my friends say, "Oh my gosh, I love that dish," I fix that dish for them. Or if I know that, a friend has an allergy, I've always, here's your allergy-free meal. So I think that just making people feel recognized and thought about, and special. So that's the inclusivity part. And what was the other one, Tracy? I'm sorry.
It's sustainable.
Sustainable. Yeah. Again, that's just looking at all of your practices from at a very deep, base level. And we can't do everything sustainably. It's not manageable on a financial end sometimes, and just not manageable logistics wise. But I think that if you take the time to look at those pieces, like, how far is your food traveling? Can I get this local? Is it affordable? How much plastic am I using during this function? Can I use something different? Can I use something compostable? Just looking at every little detail of your planning. And if you can't do it all at once, everybody understands that you maybe can't do that all at once, but pick 1 or 2 things that you can focus on that make that, a sustainable sort of practice around what you're doing. Something that we started prior to COVID in my program was a plastic resolution solution. And we knew, because of the way we worked, it's a little bit institutional type, and serving, that we couldn't remove all plastic, but we took out we took out plastic straws, and we went back to metal flatware, and I bought, magnetic traps for trash can lids so that if kids were throwing it away, we'd try to catch those. We went from individual portion cups on fruits and things like that to open bars where kids were serving themselves. We just had to make sure we had that half cup fruit measurement for the USDA pattern requirements. But so it's self-service fruit. So we eliminated a lot of unneeded, plastics. And we were actually ahead of the legislation that said that styrofoam couldn't be in restaurants by 2022. I think it's this year.
Okay. In Virginia, though. Right?
Virginia. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You have
we still have it here in my town.
Gotcha. So we had already taken styrofoam out because I just didn't like it as a, as an item in our program. So there are things that even school food services can do to be sustainable. And again, I think it goes back to that responsibility piece. We're educating, whether we're in an operations department, a school nutrition department, or, we're a teacher, we are all educating, and everything that we do leads an example to our students. So those are ways to educate,
I love that. I mean, and especially since you are in that environment, I mean, but it is, whoever's hosting the event or whatever, you're the one leading by example and showcasing what you can do and being transparent about it.
Right. Yeah. Being as transparent about it as you can. And that, that was the difficulty with COVID is, we had to flip our entire way of service. And so one of those was creating packaged unitized meals, which require plastic. So it was, really breaking my heart to have to do that, but it was necessary at the time. And it was the most efficient way that we could continue to serve wholesome scratched meals to kids. So awesome. I'm looking forward to a new school year and a return to, our basic operations. Of course, keeping everything great that we learned from COVID is, part of the practice, because there were good things that we learned. But bringing back in our plant-based food initiatives and our cultural, sensitive foods and going back to plastic solutions and things like that in our program. I'm looking forward to a return.
That's awesome. Well, you've done so much in, I don't know even how many, 6 months, right? Not even 6 months of you being diagnosed with this. And a little bit longer because you had self-diagnosed, but thank you for that. I mean, I know it's for you and your family as more than it is for the rest of the world. But I mean, we're all appreciative for what you're doing, both in the school system and introducing plant-based, but also educating on alpha-gal.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's important. And I just being in the food service industry, and probably you can identify with this, Tracy, like I think it's service-hearted people that stay in those industries. And so I do feel like that the work that I'm doing is not just for me. Like I'm upset for lots of people out there that are suffering, that don't know where to go, that don't know how to, work around these things. And that there's just a huge lack in information sharing. And that's why I'm talking. That's why I'm speaking out.
Awesome. Now, I already posted in the comments here your two Facebook groups, the Alpha Gal Now Facebook group and the Alpha Gal Educators Facebook group. How else can people get a hold of you or learn more about Alpha Gal?
Well, there are lots of great resources that people can go to learn about Alpha Gal. In particular, Alpha Gal Now is more focused on the foods and the food industry and sort of demystifying food labeling and having those conversations. And Alpha Gal Educator, the focus is, are you an educator with this? Are you an educator with a child with this? And are you a parent with a child with this? And how has it affected, the education around your students? So it's sort of a niche group. We invite anyone that's in a school system to join that, because we're really trying to find better resources to help people in the school system, deal with this challenging thing, because it's not just the food, it's classroom stuff too. It's crayons that might contain beef tallow. It's
oh, wow,
lots of practices, that we have to really be considerate of, and getting those resources together and getting them to school districts so that they can best care for their students. And then I am on Instagram as Alpha Gal Thriving, and that is more of a personal account of my life. So you'll see some Alpha Gal information, but you also get to know me better there. And then I am on Instagram as Alpha Gal Tips, where I just sort of share some quick tips around managing and dealing with Alpha Gal.
Okay, I'm going to change that to tips too. Okay. Alpha Gal Tips. Perfect. Got it in there. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Amanda. I really appreciate you being here. This is an important learning experience for all of us on this new emerging allergen that we're going to see a lot more of. And
we will see it. Yeah, we're going to see a lot more of it. It's unfortunate, but I think, that we will see an increase before we, get in front of it and sort of get a handle on it. And Tracy, can I just say thank you too for the work that you do?
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. And for, highlighting all of the food allergy concerns the whole week, and spotlighting alpha-gal syndrome. It's really important for people in the industry to know and understand this, and maybe they'll go and take a deeper Google look.
I hope so. Yeah.
I hope so too. So, and your work's very important. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. That means so much. I appreciate that. Now I'm going to cry. I mean, it's really important. And as a meeting planner who has food allergies, and I've been living with them since 2003, it's, not being able to eat at events myself. And that's the impetus about it. And I think this is really important. I think the way that you and I come about it, it's education. I don't want to, and somebody first told me when I started this is like, you're so passionate, you come off as defensive. And sometimes it's hard to hold that back. Right. But
I can understand.
Yeah. And so, and cause you're like, I'm angry about this and whatever. And I want you to understand, but we have to take that step back, take the deep breath, and let's educate. And because you didn't go to the store and buy it, and we can't go to the store and return it.
I asked actually the physician, Dr. Platzmills, if they could just take it out. Can you just take alpha-gal? If they put it in, can't you just take it out?
The answer was probably no.
It was no. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you again. And so we're going to rock it together. And I'm going to follow you on all those. I do already follow you, but I'm going to add those other Instagram and Facebook groups. So I appreciate it. All right, everybody. You're welcome. Thank you for tuning in. I can't see who was here except for Lynn. So Lynn Wellish, thank you for being here. Everyone, this is Food Allergy Awareness Week, the 8th through the 14th. I'm here every single Wednesday or every single day this week, live interviewing about food allergies. Tomorrow, I've got 2 women from the UK talking about food safety, some more, the psychosocial impacts of having, which Amanda brought up a little bit today. And then on Saturday, I've got Kyle Dine with Equal Eats. What does that mean? So thank you for tuning in. Yeah, I'm excited. And actually next Wednesday is Gwen from Allergic Living Magazine. So I'm going to kind of get a whole gamut from her.
Excellent.
But yeah. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe and eat well. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.